Most people think they know Napoleon. They know the hat, the hand inside the coat, the battlefield poses, the image of the little emperor who marched across Europe and tried to rule the world. Some remember him as a military genius, others as a tyrant, consumed by ambition. But the truth is, the Napoleon most people know is not the real man. It is the polished version history kept repeating until it became legend. Because the secret side of Napoleon is not just that he was brilliant. It is that he understood something far more dangerous than war. He understood how to turn chaos into power, how to turn victory into myth, how to make people believe that he alone was the answer to disorder, fear, and national humiliation. Napoleon Bonaparte did not simply conquer armies, he conquered imagination. And once a man controls the story, he no longer needs to be merely strong. He begins to look inevitable. Napoleon was born in 1769 on the island of Corsica, just after France had taken control of it. He was not born in Paris. He was not born into the polished heart of French elite society. He was born on the edge of empire, in a place that still felt half foreign to the kingdom he would one day dominate. When he was sent to military school in mainland France, he was mocked for his accent, his background, and his manners. He was poor by the standards of those around him. Awkward, isolated, outsider was the first role history gave him, and that may be one of the deepest keys to understanding him. Napoleon learned early that respect would not be handed to him. It would have to be taken. He buried himself in study, mathematics, artillery, ancient history, Roman greatness, command, order. He admired men who rose above their circumstances and bent the world to their will. Even before he had power, he was already obsessed with the mechanics of it. Then, the old world cracked open. The French Revolution shattered the monarchy, the nobility, and the traditional hierarchy that had defined France for centuries. To millions, it brought fear, bloodshed, instability, and confusion. But to Napoleon, it brought opportunity. The revolution destroyed barriers that would have kept a man like him on the margins forever. Suddenly, talent could rise through chaos. Suddenly, the ladder existed. He first drew serious attention during the siege of Toulon in 1793. The city had fallen into royalist hands and was supported by the British. Napoleon, still young and far from famous, distinguished himself through his mastery of artillery. He saw terrain differently. He understood angles, movement, pressure, timing. Toulon did not just reveal that he was competent. It revealed that he could think faster than the world around him. Not long after, Paris itself became another stage. In 1795, when royalists threatened the revolutionary government, Napoleon helped crush the uprising with ruthless efficiency. The famous whiff of grape shot did more than save a regime. It gave France a new kind of man, decisive, cold, effective, in a time of fear that looks almost supernatural. And that was the beginning of the transformation. Because Napoleon did not merely rise through merit, he rose through perception. When he was given command of the Army of Italy in 1796, he inherited hungry, poorly equipped troops. What followed turned him into a national sensation. He moved quickly, divided enemy forces, struck where he was not expected, and created momentum that seemed almost unreal. But here is the part many people miss. Napoleon was not just winning battles. He was narrating them. He wrote bulletins that glorified his victories. He shaped how they would be remembered. He understood that military success alone was not enough. It had to be seen, framed, mythologized. Even before he became emperor, Napoleon had already grasped something that many rulers never understand at all. Power lives not only in force, but in story. That is one of the most important secrets about him. He fought on two battlefields at once, one with cannons and cavalry, the other inside the minds of the French people. And in both, he was devastatingly good. By the late 1790s, Napoleon had become more than a general. He had become a symbol. But military fame was never enough for a man like him. He did not want to serve history. He wanted to direct it. In 1798, he launched the Egyptian campaign. Officially, it was designed to weaken British influence. In reality, it was also a personal stage. Egypt offered distance from the unstable politics of Paris and the possibility of remaking himself as more than a soldier. The campaign produced spectacle, scholarship, and headlines. Napoleon brought scientists and scholars with him. surrounding conquest with the language of civilization and discovery. That duality is crucial. He could invade a land and still present himself as its interpreter. He could wage war and still make himself look like enlightenment. Militarily, Egypt was far less successful than the legend suggested. Nelson destroyed the French fleet at the Battle of the Nile, trapping Napoleon's army. The long-term strategic value of the campaign collapsed. But once again, he managed to turn an incomplete reality into a usable narrative. He left Egypt and returned to France not as a disgraced adventurer, but as the man many were ready to trust with the nation itself. France by then was exhausted. The revolution had devoured its own children. Governments rose and fell. Corruption spread. Disorder lingered. People were tired of instability, and Napoleon understood something with almost terrifying clarity. When a nation is exhausted, it becomes willing to mistake control for salvation. In 1799, he helped carry out the coup of 18 Brumaire and emerged as first consul, effectively ruler of France. Now the secret side of Napoleon became even more complex. Because he was not simply a destroyer, he was also a builder. He reorganized administration, reformed taxation, founded the Bank of France, rebuilt institutions, strengthened education, brought relative order to a country that had lived through chaos, terror, and uncertainty. Most importantly, he oversaw the creation of the Napoleonic Code, one of the most influential legal frameworks in modern history. In many ways, he helped shape the administrative skeleton of the modern state. And yet, behind the language of order, there was something darker. Napoleon censored the press. He monitored dissent. He restricted political freedoms. Elections became instruments of approval, not genuine choice. Police networks expanded. Public opinion was managed. Stability returned, yes, but it returned under surveillance. This is what makes Napoleon so difficult to place inside a simple moral frame. He brought order. But he also narrowed freedom. He modernized the state. But he concentrated power around himself. Then came the moment that revealed perhaps more than any other who he really was. In 1804, the child of the revolution crowned himself emperor, not king by blood, not servant of the people, emperor. And he did not wait for someone else to place the crown on his head. He took it himself. The symbolism was enormous. Napoleon was saying, without needing to say it directly, that legitimacy no longer came from old dynasties or sacred tradition. It came from power successfully seized and theatrically displayed. He had risen from the wreckage of a revolution that claimed to overthrow monarchy, only to build a new empire centered on himself. It was one of the greatest contradictions in modern history. And at first it worked magnificently. Austerlitz in 1805 became his masterpiece. Against Austrian and Russian forces, Napoleon delivered one of the most brilliant victories in military history. Europe watched as he redrew borders, humbled dynasties, and made old powers look ancient and weak. At the height of his power, he seemed unstoppable. Kingdoms fell, coalitions broke. The map itself looked temporary under his gaze. This is where admiration becomes dangerous, because Napoleon's greatness often distracts from the machinery beneath it. His empire fed on constant war. Every victory demanded more men, more money, more obedience, more sacrifice. His brilliance did not remove the cost. It amplified it. Entire populations were pulled into the orbit of his ambition. What Paris called glory, much of Europe experienced as domination. And there is a darker truth still. In 1802, Napoleon restored slavery in French colonies after it had been abolished during the Revolution. This was not a minor contradiction. It was a brutal decision, one that exposed the cold priorities beneath his image as a modernizing reformer. Liberty, equality, and progress had limits when weighed against imperial profit and control. The man who gave Europe legal order was still willing to preserve oppression when it served the empire. That matters, because it reminds us that historical brilliance is often morally incomplete. Napoleon was not simply the enlightened genius of popular memory, nor was he only a monster in uniform. He was something more unsettling than either. He was effective, and effective men are often admired long after people forget what their effectiveness cost. As the years passed, the empire grew larger, but also more fragile. The continental system, designed to economically weaken Britain, placed heavy burdens on allies and subject states. Trade suffered, resentment spread, resistance grew. In Spain, French occupation triggered a brutal war that drained lives, resources, and prestige. What looked like control on imperial maps looked very different on the ground. It looked like exhaustion. It looked like hatred. Then came Russia. In 1812, Napoleon launched one of the most catastrophic invasions in history. He entered with one of the largest armies Europe had ever seen, convinced that one more decisive campaign would force the Tsar to yield. Instead, he encountered a different kind of enemy: distance, cold, fire, hunger, retreat, emptiness. The Russians gave ground, burned supplies, and allowed the land itself to become a weapon. Napoleon reached Moscow, but there was no real victory waiting for him there. The city burned, the supplies were gone, winter closed in, and the retreat became a nightmare. Men froze, starved, collapsed on roads turned into corridors of death. Horses died. Order disintegrated. The Grand Army, once the instrument of Napoleon's near-mythical ascent, dissolved into horror. And with it, something even greater began to collapse: the illusion. Because Russia did not merely destroy an army, it shattered inevitability. After that, Europe changed its posture. Enemies who once feared him now saw weakness. Coalitions returned. In 1813, he suffered a major defeat at Leipzig. In 1814, Paris fell. Napoleon abdicated and was exiled to Elba. For most men, that would have been the end. For Napoleon, even defeat became theater. He escaped Elba, returned to France, reclaimed power. For a brief, almost surreal moment, it seemed the legend might overpower reality one final time. The 100 Days were not just political, they were theatrical. Europe was no longer dealing with a mere former ruler. It was dealing with a man who refused to leave the stage. Then came Waterloo. In 1815, the myth met its final limit. Napoleon faced Wellington and the Prussians in the battle that ended not just an empire, but an era. This time there would be no triumphant return, no new narrative strong enough to reverse the outcome. He was defeated decisively and sent far away to Saint Helena, a remote island in the South Atlantic. And yet, even there, because the final secret side of Napoleon may be this: even in defeat, he kept shaping memory. On Saint Helena, he reflected, dictated, justified, reinterpreted. He continued to influence how the world would remember him. He understood that armies could be lost, crowns taken, maps redrawn, but memory was still a battlefield. And if he could not rule Europe anymore, he could still haunt it. He died there in 1821, but he did not disappear. Because Napoleon left behind more than conquests. He left codes, institutions, ideas, administrative systems, national awakenings, and endless arguments. Was he the heir of the revolution or its betrayer? A genius of statecraft or a master of controlled power? A builder of the modern world or the architect of mass destruction across a continent? The answer is uncomfortable. He was all of those things at once. That is why he still fascinates people 2 centuries later. Not because he was easy to admire, but because he was impossible to reduce. He embodied the modern age before the modern age fully understood itself. Ambition without limit, order without humility, brilliance without moral clarity, performance fused to authority so completely that even now, many people still cannot tell where the real man ends and the legend begins. And maybe that is the deepest truth of all. Napoleon did not become immortal because he won every battle. He did not. He did not become immortal because he was right. Often he was not. He became immortal because he understood that history remembers those who leave scars on both the world and the imagination. The secret side of Napoleon is not that history completely lied about him. It is that history often simplifies the men who are made of contradiction. Napoleon was revolutionary and imperial, rational and theatrical. modern and brutal, a reformer who centralized power, a lawgiver who restored slavery, a military genius who could not stop turning victory into hunger for more. He rose from the edge of France to the center of Europe. He crowned himself. He reordered a continent. He burned through nations. He fell, and even after falling, he kept whispering into the memory of the world. That is why he still feels larger than life. Because in the end, Napoleon did not just try to conquer Europe, he tried to conquer time. And in one sense, he succeeded. If this story changed the way you see him, subscribe to The Secret Side of History and tell me in the comments, was Napoleon a genius who shaped the modern world?
Or a man whose ambition cost Europe more than history likes to admit?